Good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's session. My name is Vicki Lightbound. I'm the Director for the Water Innovation Program here at Alberta Innovates. Before we begin, I'm just going to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are engagement tools that you can use. All the engagement tools are resizable, movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A tool. We will try to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the webcast. The group chat box is a useful tool to connect with other participants. I'd encourage you to use the tool to discuss the session topic, but please don't let it distract you from the presentation. For the best viewing experience, we recommend closing any programs or browser sessions that could. You can find additional answers to some common technical questions located in the help tool at the bottom of your screen. So with that, I would like to welcome everyone to the Alberta Innovates Water Innovation Connect series, Planning for the Future. As our climate changes, Alberta faces a new and uncertain water future. One of the most challenging questions about climate change in Alberta is how future climate will affect water availability across the province. Modeling can help us visualize possible future scenarios that can be used to help Albertans prepare for that future. Today, you'll hear from Monireh Faramarzi with the University of Alberta and Jeff Fetter with Associated Engineering. Their bios are available in your engagement tools. For those of you not familiar, Alberta Innovates is a provincial corporation created to support research and innovation activities. We provide funding programs, advice, connections, technical expertise, and applied research services. Our scope encompasses the whole innovation journey, from generation of ideas through applied testing and validation to commercialization and end use. This Water Connect series will share ideas and outcomes from projects that are funded through Alberta Innovates Water Innovation Program. The Water Innovation Program is designed to help achieve the goals of Alberta's Water for Life strategy and Alberta's Water Research and Innovation strategy. The knowledge and technologies developed in this program will help to create a clean tech industry in water treatment, support improvement in water use, conservation, efficiency, and productivity, and provide safe, secure, and reliable water resources for a growing population, while maintaining the health of aquatic ecosystems. I hope this series will provide you with some valuable information and spark discussion. Now let's get started. I will pass it over to Monireh, who will be speaking on her project, Adapting to Changing Water in Alberta.
Hello, everybody. So thank you very much, Becky, for the great introduction. So my name is Monireh. I'm assistant professor with the University of Alberta. So this is the content of my presentation. So first, I would like to give a brief introduction about the project, about project history, and what we've done so far. And I'll then introduce Alberta Water Model. I won't quite focus on calibration, validation, technical matters, but mainly future projections, as I've been extensively presenting this in the past, and I'm hoping that I won't repeat most of the things that I presented in the past. So, but more specifically, I would like to a little bit present some of our results on model application, mainly about wetlands in Alberta, how climate change is going to change our wetlands in Alberta. That was the scope of that project. And then if time allows, I also would like to a little bit present on implication of climate change to crop yields in our province, water consumption, and implication for beef industry. But in the end, I would like to also present a little bit of our limitations and future for work for future directions. So to start with, a little bit introduction about the project itself. This project was funded 3 years ago by Alberta Innovates. And so the overall goal of the project was to understand water security issues, mainly water in Alberta, across the province at the provincial scale. And so our objectives were first to set up hydrologic models to understand water supply, their spatiotemporal dynamics in the past, and also understanding processes affecting their hydrological changes in the future as well under future climate change projections. But on the other hand, we were actually aiming to also understand water needs or water demand of different water dependent industries, and to putting these two kinds of information together, understanding supply-demand issues, hopefully in the long run for sustainable water management in our watersheds in the province. So especially in the right-hand side, you can see that there are few other projects. The time that this project was funded, Alberta Innovates, and 2 other projects were already funded at the same time by Alberta Agriculture Forestry, with a more main focus on understanding water issues to beef industry, and also by ABMI, Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute, understanding water-related implications or risks to Alberta's wetlands, and of course other previously funded and completed projects like predicting Alberta's water future. So, and this was actually an excellent opportunity, a great opportunity for me as well, because that was the time that I almost started my appointment with the University of Alberta to set up. Actually, it was a great opportunity for me to set up my long-term research goal in actually trying to understand not only these natural processes affecting our hydrological water resources, but also trying to connect these natural processes, their spatiotemporal changes, such as physical, hydrological, and biochemical processes, into our anthropogenic factors, to our development plans from different water use industries, and hoping for understanding their spatiotemporal dynamics and interactions, and connecting these information into our import-export pattern of different commodities that we produce in the province, which also contribute to a big share of our economy in the province, and hoping for and trying for, in the long run, for integrated water resource management within the context of water, food, energy nexus, including environment. So why this is important, and I took this opportunity to also set my long-term goal, first because I was really passionate about this for many years, but also when you look at literature, the vast majority of studies within the context of water, food, energy nexus, trying to understand water security issues, they are either mainly socioeconomic driven kind of studies, so more emphasis on socioeconomic factors and natural processes, or a lot of them, they are actually focusing on understanding environmental processes without enough representation of socioeconomic factors and bringing them together. So this project really provided me a wonderful opportunity to set this as my long-term goal, and I will work with everyone in the province, hopefully, towards that goal. And so with regards to this specific project, the water model to begin with, this was the water model. So I'll just skip this slide. So in terms of the water model, as I've presented, I believe I've presented so many times this in the past, and most of the audience must be familiar with these slides, but just overview, our model of choice was soil and water assessment tool. This is one of the widely used models, physical process-based semi-distributed model. We chose this model for several reasons. One of the reasons is because one of the best models, almost, I would say there is no single best, of course, this is a little bit tricky work, but one of the good models, efficient models at the large regional scale, that also provides not only understanding water supply, but also various water demand aspects as well in the future, and water quality simulations as well. For this model, we of course provided a lot of information, from topographic data to land use, land cover map, their physical properties for different land use classes, soil, climate data, information about geospatial features of our watersheds, including potholes, wetlands, operation of dams, some management data in this regards, and as well as agricultural management data, because a lot of time, agricultural management, such as irrigation, can actually affect our hydrological water balance and water resources, as well as, of course, hydrometric data for stream flow measurements for model calibration. So we did our best to collect as much data as possible at the provincial scale to hopefully set up a more representative model, rather than putting all of the effort and the work to be done simply through calibration and validation. So after we, like a lot of back and forth processes to really set up a model that represents reality to the best of our capacity and the best available data at that time, we then started calibration and validation of our model. And for this, first of all, our model, we delineated 22 55 subbasins, 2,255 subbasins in this at the provincial scale in our model. And for the calibration or validation, we used hydrometric data for the last 25 years. These are stream flow measurements in these red points that you can see in the map. And these are the stations based on which we calibrated our stream flow simulation in the model. We extensively discussed all the possibilities, risks, and uncertainties. And one point that I would like to mention is that stream flow measurements are really great when you use for calibration, because those are kind of an index or a variable that represents a lot of kind of cumulative processes in their upstream watersheds, hydrological processes, but it doesn't quite really tell you whether each of individual processes are really well represented. So therefore, we also, in addition to stream flow simulation that we calibrated our model, we also calibrated based on crop yields. And given that crop and agricultural lands cover almost half of our province based on this map in the white region, we believe that calibration of our model against yield will give us more confidence about evapotranspiration as well. Why? Because in literature there is a strong relationship between crop yield and vegetation biomass and evapotranspiration. With calibration of our model against yield, we believe the evapotranspiration in our hydrological simulation is also rather representative, as well as a stream flow. That is another verification to the model. And these are some of the results that I presented in the past and I showed in the past meetings. So these are our model calibrated results, stream flow simulated results for a few selected stations from those red points that I showed in the map. X-axis is the time. These are time series data, and Y-axis is stream flow cubic meter per second. And these are hydrographs for different stations. Blue signals in these graphs are observed or measured data, and the red are model simulated. But the range that you see as the shaded area in orange color or pink, that is the uncertainty that comes from model projection, model prediction. This uncertainty has a variety of different reasons. It's not just model process simulation related. It's not just model inability to simulate a certain process, but it represents a variety of different uncertainties, from input data all the way to model setup, all the way to processes, as well as management assumptions that we have made. And so in some stations, for example, some basins, such as the one that I'm showing with the blue box in the top left, you see model projection results are really good. So blue and green are matching very well. However, there is a higher uncertainty prediction in this part of the province. That indicates that we had to make some assumption because climate data were not quite available in this part of the province. And whereas in the other one that I'm showing with the highlighting with the red box, simulation results are acceptable, but uncertainty prediction is lower as compared to the other. So this way we try to also inform, hopefully, our decision makers that it is not just a single optimal solution we would provide in our hydrological models, but also we're speaking and trying to make more information with regards to how much assumptions we have made and how much uncertainty can come in these projections. So with acknowledging such uncertainties in some, especially in northern and western part of the province, we ran this model to actually get a sense of how a spatial temporal pattern of our hydrological water balance looks like, such as snowfall, for example, snow melt, blue water, which is surface water and groundwater, and green water flow, which is actual evapotranspiration, and green water storage, which is soil water. These are based on long-term average from the historical data simulated by model for each of these 2255 subbasins. But the available data are in the form of time series data at daily to monthly to yearly. depending on what we really need. So we did not stop working on this Alberta water model since when 3 years ago, we started to work and build this model. More recently, I had the opportunity to supervise two graduate students and to be able to improve our water model of the province continuously. We will do it in the future as well. That's one of my objectives in my research lab. So, for example, glacier simulation was not quite efficient in that model, and so we are now examining a lot of more state-of-the-art methods and data for glacier contribution or snowmelt as well. For example, in terms of snowmelt, there's huge discussion in literature that what approach people should use to simulate snow. Snow is one of the key processes in our watersheds in Alberta, in Western Canada, and in Canada overall. And so it's critical to decide whether EBM, which is energy balance-based approach, or TIM, temperature-based, temperature index models, which are more simplistic. So EBMs are more comprehensive or more process representative models, so more robust in terms of process simulation, but TIMs are a little bit more simplistic in terms of the processes that they are simulating. So we examine these two approaches by taking a watershed in our province, North Saskatchewan watershed, and we examine how these two methods perform in terms of uncertainty when it comes to snow melt and snow depth projection in the future in different geospatial and hydroclimatic settings. So like in mountainous regions, if you can see in all of these maps, y-axis is the percent share of uncertainty when it comes to future projection of snow depth from different sources. The yellow part is the share of uncertainty from the use of EBMs and TIMs. These are snow depth simulation modules, and different colors are projections from global climate models or RCP emission scenarios and DS or downscaling methods. As you can see in mountainous regions, the yellow, the share of uncertainty from EBMs and TIMs, no matter what snow density formulation you use, in four panels or graphs within that mountainous region, it is always high. It always dominates any other uncertainty in that mountainous region. As long as you move towards foothill and then plain, you see that that other colors appear more, and so the share of uncertainty from these EBMs and TIMs become less, but their difference becomes more apparent. So the conclusion was that when it comes to mountainous region where we had minimum data available to set up our model, and these are mainly climate data, it doesn't matter what kind of process, whether the most comprehensive physical process-based model like EBM you use for a simulation of depth, or TIM, which is more simplistic. They're both performing poor, and they are both performing equally poor in terms of uncertainty prediction. However, the more you move towards more homogeneous, more data-driven, data availability region, their difference becomes more apparent. And of course, EBM in our simulation performs gives us a higher uncertainty because it requires more data, because it simulates more processes and more assumptions. Therefore, we needed to make because more those data were not available, and therefore more uncertainty appears in EBM rather than TIMs. Likewise, when you come to a glacier simulation, we are testing a variety of different methods and approaches in our province. To simulate snow melt, mass balance, and their evolution. More specifically, in the water model that we developed, are glacier contributions from upstream regions of the watersheds in the lower part, in the southern part of the province, were basically based on a simple melt and mass balance simulation model that we actually worked and developed this approach during the time when we built this model, in collaboration with the University of Calgary, some of the collaborators, the University of Calgary. But now we are enhancing this to actually include evolution of glaciers as well, because glaciers and their melt are origin of water supply for some of the water-dependent industries and energy production in higher like upland sub-basins, and it is extremely important to simulate them in a more representative way. And this is one of our brand new results right now, just very quick. So no matter, here I'm showing using CTIM, HTIM, PTIM. These are different melt and mass balance approaches that are being used in literature, and also different condition that we set in different evolution and etc. So no matter what kind of approach we're using for glacier evolution in terms of area and volume change, in Pedro Glacier and Athabasca Glacier, we're seeing that in the past, these glaciers are both area and volume are actually declining, and so the trend is declining. That is one the obvious. Now we're trying to actually explain more these graphs and to find out the possible reasons to fix and embed them in our models as well. So once we had these models set up, next we wanted to project water balance components for the future. And so what we basically needed is to use calibrated, validated model, and then to use climate projections from different GCMs and RCP scenarios, feed them, downscale them, and feed them to a hydrologic model, run them, and project these water balance data. So in these are example projections for blue water, for example, and actual evapotranspiration, some example maps. And animation in these maps and animated colors are related to the type of the GCMs and scenarios that we use for future projections. So what is apparent to me is that in some parts of the province, if you look at the left-hand side map for blue water, no matter what GCM and RCM perhaps you're using, in the vast majority of these sub-basin in southeast, they're always like red, which means that most of models and like climate models and scenarios, perhaps they project similar direction of change, whereas other parts of the province, there is a range of possibilities projected in terms of water availability for those sub-basins. So therefore, we concluded that it is evident and it is important to actually use ensemble projections for these sub-basins instead of one single specific model and scenario. And of course, we use these projections for the future, not only to look at a spatial pattern, but also to look at how their temporal pattern as well, how they shift, where they shift, when they shift, how about their peaks and low flows. And I'm sure Jeff will present some of these applications for their modeling. So I'm not explaining a lot of details about this. So next, more specifically now, I would like to also a little bit present about model applications. So that was more about the water model or water supply information, how we actually prepared and where we are at. But now we took one step further, trying to understand application or implication of these models for understanding what these water changes in the future mean to Alberta's wetlands across the province. For this work, I had the opportunity to supervise 2 postdocs and also collaborate with ABMI researchers. So our collective and collaborative work is currently in reviewing ecological indicators. And in this work, more specifically, we were interested to look at regional changes in wetland water storage volume and with the influence of future climate change in geographically isolated wetlands. What I mean, in terms of wetlands, we did not look at all of the wetlands, all different types of wetlands in the province, but more specifically, we were interested to look at what climate change means and how does it change the behavior of geographically isolated wetlands. We did not look at riparian wetlands at all because that was beyond the scope of this specific paper. And so we filtered all of the data we had. So we just wanted to make sure that whatever we're talking about, whatever we are working on, these are geographically isolated wetlands. So to start with, we wanted to, first of all, we wanted to understand what is the status quo situation? What is the water volume of these wetlands? How much water these wetlands are currently storing, based on which we could project, we use our water data, our water model to project future. But these kind of information are not available. We don't know what is the volume of wetlands, water storage, geographically isolated wetlands in the province. So number one goal was to set up and to calculate or to simulate or to estimate these volumes first. So to do this, we collaborated with ABMI, and ABMI has an inventory of wetland sampling sites. So they have depth measurements across the province for different wetland sites. And so we filtered all their sampling sites, and we came up to 234 GIWs, or geographically isolated wetlands, because we just eliminated anything else. We were not interested to riparian wetlands. We were not interested to like lakes or bigger wetlands, just the 234 sampling sites. So we took their water depth data. And so based on these water depth data and based on some geospatial maps that we had in the lab, we did some GIS analysis, and we converted these water depth data for these 234 sampling sites into the volume. So we could calculate their volumes, assuming that these are representative, because their depth measurements are available for 31 points in each sampling sites. It's very precise comparatively at the regional scale. But then in the meantime, for each of these sampling sites, we also calculated through some geospatial maps, GIF, or geographic information features, such as slope parameters, their surface water areas, and et cetera, et cetera. Next, we actually developed a model to relate these volumes to these geographic information features. So for this, we examined 21 machine learning regression models. And these are from state-of-the-art models that are examined for hydrological studies, 21 machine learning models. We calibrated and validated them independently for those wetlands that are located in white region and green region. By green region, we mean the boreal area, and white region is more agriculturally dominated regions. So as you can see in this figure, x-axis is GIW, the code or the name that we actually assign to each of these geographic isolated wetlands, 234 in general. And then the y-axis is water storage volume. So these X or crosses are the measured. Those are based on depth measurement of ABMI that I just explained, that how we measure those volumes. And the other ones are simulated based on our model, based on machine learning models. The majority of them performed not too bad in terms of trend, representation of trend, but only one of them performed best. So in terms for both calibration validation in a green area and white area. And we picked those best performing models. And then next, we wanted to now calculate water volume or water storage volume of other GIWs within the province than these 200 sites. So for this, we use Alberta Merged Wetland Inventory map from AEP 2018. So based on this map, we identified about 1,000 GIWs, 99,892 GIWs within the province. Then we use that model that we developed using machine learning methods, and then we actually used it to calculate the volume. So figure A shows the water storage volume of GIWs for the baseline or status quo situation in the province. And the other two maps, B and C, they present some of the geospatial features, such as number of GIWs or water surface area of GIWs. I must point out that these maps are presented as sub-basin scale because our water data, our water model is actually performing at sub-basin scale. But our calculations, everything was done for each individual GIW, but we just aggregated results from GIW to sub-basin scale just for the matter of presentation. So next, we wanted to project how these GIWs or water volume of these wetlands are changing in the future, and where and in what direction, and what are the processes driving these increasing or possibly decreasing trends. So this is the formula or the model that we use to simulate water storage volume of wetlands in the future. So that we initiated this model using this volume that we just calculated for status quo. And then we actually constrained this formula based on Vmax, or volume maximum capacity of each of these GIWs in the province. So doing so, we could actually project how water storage volume is fluctuating for each of these GIWs and then aggregated them into each river basin. And now in this figure, I'm showing how these water storage volume projected for GIWs within each of these river basins. So we have 17 river basins in the province. As you can see, first of all, the range is the projections for the effect of different GCMs and RCP scenarios. And then the line, there's one single line that is fluctuating, that is median of ensemble, projections for different scenarios, and the straight line is the trend analysis that we perform. As you can see, in some river basins such as Bow River, Red Deer River, Milk River, most of southern river basins, the water volume, it seems they are showing decreasing trend in the future, although there is fluctuation ups and downs because of wet season and dry season, but the overall trend over the long run is decreasing. However, in some other river basins, we found that it is either increasing or increasing, decreasing, and becoming like constant. So to better understand what are the driving force behind this, whether it is climate change, or is it hydrological processes, or if it is geographic features of every specific kind of GIWs that is driving such a trend. For this, we ran different scenarios. I'm not showing all of those scenarios, but one of the scenarios, for example, in this scenario, what we assume, basically, if you remember, I mentioned that our water storage volume calculation is actually constrained by the maximum capacity of each GIW. But basically, we don't have that one maximum capacity based on the data. There is no data. Usually, if LiDAR data was available for us, for researchers in the provincial scale, perhaps we could have opportunity to really precisely estimate Vmax, but there is nothing like this available for us. So we came up with some statistical approach. What we did, we assumed that the maximum capacity of each individual GIW can vary anything between their baseline volume and 3 times of the baseline volume. And then we sampled this range 100 times. And for each Vmax, we ran our model to see how model behaves and what is the water storage volume. And then we aggregated those data from individual GIWs to river basin again. And then we presented in this figure. Again, y-axis is water storage volume, and x-axis is the time for the future projection. In these projections, I'm not showing any uncertainty from future GCMs, and I'm just using one GCM because our scenario was actually trying to understand how much Vmax is affecting these uncertainties in the future rather than climate change. As you can see, this is very exciting result, very interesting result. As you can see, in some river basins like Milk River, Red Deer, Bow River, all those river basins in the south, even though we are changing Vmax, maximum capacity of volume of these GIWs, it seems that they are not responding, and because there's only one single line, very narrow line, but they are always declining. Whereas there are some other river basins like Athabasca. If you look at North Saskatchewan, there's a huge range, and actually depending on what Vmax you're using, it could give you a completely decreasing trend in the blue part, all the way to increasing trend as compared to the past in the red trend. If you can see, there is a spectrum of the projections from blue all the way to red. So what does it tell me? It tells me that based on putting this information into next to hydrologic water changes and all those processes, we concluded that in the southern part of the province, where hydrologic and climatic changes are the most limiting factors, it doesn't matter perhaps how much water storage volume or Vmax we are providing, because they never reach their maximum capacity, because this is either because of drier condition or because of higher evapotranspiration, because we put all those information, and therefore these GIWs never get to their maximum level to actually spill out. However, in other parts of the province like North Saskatchewan, Peace, Athabasca, because it is dry, it is warmer, and it is more closer to their maximum capacity in terms of water storage, they actually easily get full, and so they spill out. So therefore, the Vmax is extremely important, how to set up Vmax for these processes. Unfortunately, I'm, I guess, out of time and I cannot present this work, hopefully in the future opportunities. I was hoping that I can present some of our brief results, but I'm going to show you this slide. This is the limitations. Of course, our work is not free of error, assumption, uncertainties, and these uncertainties and limitations come from a variety of different sources. We have extensively reported all of them in our papers and publications wherever possible, including uncertainties from data, process simulation, and the assumptions we had to make in terms of management. For example, in our water projections, we assume that operation of dams are similar to, in the future, are similar to the historic, and et cetera, et cetera. So In terms of like process simulation, it is our agenda to improve our models and enhance them as much as possible. In the future, for example, in our wetland work, we never simulated seasonal connectivity of these GIWs, and this is the next step that we would like to go ahead. And few publications for whoever is interested. And last not least, I would like to acknowledge our funding sources, all of them who generously supported these projects so far. And more specifically, I would like to thank all of my collaborators, all of my colleagues at the University of Alberta, in Alberta, Canada, and internationally from both academic and non-academic centers, whoever collaborated with us and provided feedback. And without their help, their feedback, these works were not possible at all. And thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for listening to my work.
Thank you, Monireh. I really appreciate the presentation and trying to stay on time. If we have time at the end, depending on how the Q&A goes and there's interest, then we can maybe go back to that part of your presentation. Just a reminder to everybody to continue to submit your questions through the Q&A box. For both Monireh and Jeff, we'll try and get to as many as we can. So now over to Jeff, who will be speaking on his project, Drinking Water Infrastructure Risk and Vulnerability Study.
Great, thanks, Vicky. I assume you can hear me? Yeah, okay, perfect. Just make sure my mic. So yeah, thanks for everyone joining us here today. And Monireh, thanks for that overview of your work. We had the fortune to collaborate with Monireh's group on this project, and we'll get into that. So yeah, this is a project that we completed for Alberta Innovates in partnership with Alberta Environment and Parks over the last couple of years, and it's just recently been wrapped up. So first I thought I'd a little bit talk about all the noise and, why is everyone talking about climate change? There's a lot of source documents that have, over the last 10, 15 years have been talking about climate change and trying to push for more awareness, trying to push for, more planning for what the future impacts may be and how to manage those. And as a result of that, in the last, 5 years at least, we're really seeing a trend where there's enough research, there's enough push that these topics are coming into sort of the project realm, call it. And one of those big pushes has been funding and insurance. So the insurance companies and the funders have become much more interested in climate change and how that's going to impact projects and investments down the road. And the insurance data speaks for itself. Over time, they're seeing a significant increase in catastrophic losses due to climate related events, whether it's floods, wildfires, hailstorms. And interesting bit there from the Insurance Bureau of Canada is that they estimate that the investment in resiliency or adaptation can have up to a 6 to 1 benefit. So the cost of your adaptation can save you six times in future recovery costs. And the example they have is the Manitoba Red River floodway that in 1960 cost $63 million and is estimated to avoid over $8 billion in damage. So that just puts a bit of a context to why this is becoming more of a topic item as owners, engineers, and so forth are looking to expand existing infrastructure or build new infrastructure that has been impacted. Another stakeholder is the disaster financial assistance program that many folks see when we get floods and so forth. And the Minister of Public Safety in Canada says that, at some point we're going to have to say if people ignore the knowledge base and rebuild in danger zones, then they're going to have to assume their own cost. And that's become a bigger topic in not such a precise statement, but certainly that is gathering some attention as to, oh, well, do we really want to rebuild somewhere that has been prone to flood or wildfire or other issues? And Engineers of Canada also has a national guideline indicating that we as professional engineers should be integrating climate information into our practices where it's reasonable. And just a quick, how do we integrate climate change into projects? Is pretty, it's pretty simple on the surface, I guess. Is we have standards that we've been following based on historical norms, and then we need to add in what is the projected climate change, and then we have a new standard for that particular question. And this is really a concept that in engineering design we've been as part of our general practice really forever. And a couple comparisons are, we've always looked at what is the capacity required to service a population, and that population is going to grow. So then we design for a future population of some sort. Another example is regulatory change. So we have current regulations. We know regulations are going to change over the life cycle of a facility, and therefore, as much as possible, we try to look forward and design a system for regulatory change, or so it can be modified to incorporate future regulatory change. And a lot of time that overall concept is called future-proofing. And this project is really, to give some insight as to what should we be considering for future-proofing drinking water assets in the future. So vulnerability assessments, what's generally involved. I like to look at a question of uncertainty, because we're always dealing with uncertainty. And when you look at Monireh's modeling data, there's lots of uncertainty there, and that's the nature of any model. And but it's a tool that can be used, and it can help us guide. So generally, if we don't have much data, we're in this subjective world, and our decisions are guided through intuition. And really, with more data, more information, understanding of risk, where we want to get to is, through an objective question and answer, a more knowledge-guided decision. So for vulnerability assessments, a very basic process is to establish a climate baseline. What is the timeline? Look at climate infrastructure interactions, select your climate variables, then project the climate into the future, and then do a risk assessment. And the big question is always, what's that historic flood level that we use as a guide, and then how might it change in the future? That was really the primary question in this project. So the project looked at 48 different drinking water facilities across the province, and drinking water systems are sort of inherently reliant on rivers, creeks, lakes, groundwater sources. So a lot of the time they sit nestled right beside a river, and are therefore potentially adversely or more highly affected by climate change. And the purpose of this project was to provide a very high-level assessment of the past vulnerability and then likelihood of the increased changing in risk of high and low stream flows. So is there too much water causing flooding, or is there not enough water to provide stream flow? And this the project did really give us a unique opportunity to partner with Monireh at the U of A to utilize their model to help answer this question, and I think take us a little bit more into that objective uncertainty. So the facility assessment is where we started. The facility assessment was done through an online questionnaire to each of the operators to gauge the future level of, the past level of risk that these sites may have seen and how prepared they may be for future change and either flooding and or drought of their sites. The assessment was targeted to look at the supply, infrastructure, treatment, and distribution at a very high level. And then there was a weighted evaluation process utilized to assess the facility and then rank each site as to how vulnerable they are to past events. And in doing this, I say weighted because we did weight the supply infrastructure to be more critical in the sense of too much water or too little water than the treatment and the distribution, as the questionnaires and the process really lent to those are the most sensitive assets because those are usually the closest to the natural water bodies. So getting to the results of the questionnaire, these were the results of the high stream flow. So you can see here that we ranked all of the 48 sites, gave them a score, and essentially blue is best and red is worst. And you can see that really the majority of the sites have a low or moderate past score, but there are some that certainly had issues in the past. And I should say, as part of the criteria, we did consider the physical location of the site. So basically, their vertical and linear separation from the water bodies, and that did factor into the score as well. So if you have a pump house that's right beside the river, that scored more points and therefore was more vulnerable than if you have a pump house up on an upper bank of a river. And then for the low stream flow, similar process, and in general, you can see that there's less past history of risk due to low stream flow. And certainly the past risk is much more concentrated in southern Alberta areas. So from there, we went on to the climate assessment. And this graphic here is an attempt to sort of explain the overall process. It started with the SWOT model, which Monireh's team ran, and then gave us a whole bunch of data. As Monireh said, they have over 2,000 SWOT catchments. So we had to indicate a SWOT catchment that would be representative for each of the sites. And then they gave us model data for the past time period and the future time periods for 5 different climate models and 2 different RCP scenarios. So it was a lot of data, and we had to, from that data, then go in and assess how does that fit in a statistical sense for what the past high or low levels were. So what is the Q100 or 200 historically? And then what does the model show that it would be in the future? And from there, we had an estimated change with certain levels of accuracy, and would then identify the medium in this case, which we thought was most representative, and then translate that to the site. So what does that actually mean on the site as to the potential actual change in water level? So getting to some findings on the climate side, these are the findings for floods or high flows. And for the Q100, you can see in general that the province province, flood levels tend to increase, and then are certainly most severe, I guess, in the central part. So I should explain that that red is flow increasing, and the size of the triangle is the magnitude of that. Green is flows decreasing, and similarly, the size of the triangles represents the magnitude. And the findings on the low flow were similar as far as how they're represented here, but you can see that it was not quite as much spatial differentiation. Generally, the low flows, and we chose a number of low flow indices to try to see what was most representative at each site. But in general, the low flows were found to be increasing, with the exception of once you get into southern Alberta and further east, that trend seems to change. So then once we had that data, as I said, we had to translate that to the site. So look at the watershed assessment. So for each of the sites, we identified the sub basin, and then the nearest water survey of Canada gauge location. So up on the upper left of the screen, those are the sub basins for the sites, and then the Water Survey of Canada's sites. And Water Survey of Canada sites were not always particularly representative because they're further away or may not represent specifically where the raw water intake site was. But in general sense, we would generate what is the historical stage discharge curve, so flood levels versus volumes in the streams. So we had the historical Q100 or Q200, and then for each of the scenarios, we would say, okay, this is the future projected, and then we can look at the impact of the change as far as the changing volume and the changing levels. So from there, we went to the to actually do the VRA, and VRAs, or risk assessments, are generally viewed as it's a function of the likelihood of an event and the consequence of that event. The way this was used in this case was the facility assessment, so the past vulnerability based on the questionnaires and the physical layouts of the sites was the likelihood of the potential impacts. And then the climate change and the watershed assessment gave us the next point for the consequence of the climate change and changing water levels or increasing impacts. Another way to look at that is that the risk is really a function of the past vulnerability and the future climate change. And the past was determined by the questionnaire and the layout of the source, treatment, and distribution systems. And then the future climate change was the SWOT model, and then the relative delta or change. And then we could get the potential impacts. So your typical risk matrix, on the top, or the X, we had the facility assessment, so that sort of give us our starting point. And then on the vertical, we had the likelihood of change due to climate change, and that would show the increasing risks. And as far as the results, to jump into it, the outcomes for the high stream flow are shown, and on the overall map, you can see that green is less vulnerable, and red is critically vulnerable. And these same donut chart that we showed for the facility assessment, you can see in general that it's sort of wheeling around clockwise, and we're seeing more sites that are creeping up in risk. And on the low stream flows, similar view of the results. Not quite as much change, but certainly a very defined spatial pattern in the sense that northern Alberta, we don't see a lot of changing risk. And that doesn't mean that, I should say that green does not mean a facility may not be at risk of either high stream flows or low stream flows. It means that risk is not going to change significantly based on the climate change data. So in southern Alberta, you can see we're starting to see more of the yellows and the oranges. So that's indicating that there is more risk of the low flows going down and actually creating risk of not having water supply. So looking at the increasing risks, which I think is really the most interesting way to look at this, is for high flow. 33 of the sites showed increasing risk into that moderate or critical risk level, and that represents an additional 20 sites. So 41% of the sites we're seeing a jump in risk in the future, and 9 of the sites were in the critical risk category. And for low, similarly, we had 24 sites, sort of that moderate or higher, and that represents an additional 10 sites of the 48 or 21% that were showing an increase in risk of impacts from low stream flows. So in conclusion, many of the facilities are showing higher risks, and we're looking at 48 sites across the province, which really represent sort of the medium size sites. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but as far as drinking water facilities across the province, there's over 400. And a lot of those are in smaller rural communities, as far as hamlets and villages. And those sites, you would sort of anticipate they would see a similar spatial pattern, and really don't have the resources to understand what their future risks may be. So that that it certainly shows that this is something that should be looked at in the future as systems are going to either expand or be rebuilt. We did see a risk increase with the different greenhouse gas scenarios, not quite as defined as you would have thought between our RCP 2.6 and 8.5, but the general trend is that RCP 8.5 does result in higher risks. Generally, the change, you see it more in the longer term future than the shorter term future. There certainly are spatial patterns on the province that would help focus understanding that risk. In many of the higher risk sites, in order to support a specific action, call it, really you would require more specific assessment of those sites to better understand what the risks are and how it would impact their future plans at those sites. And in general, it's climate change. I think this shows it should be an important consideration in the future planning and the design of drinking water sites across the province. The process that we used as far as the SWOT model and so forth turned out what I think is a very good assessment as a predictor of future event. It's a tool. but not a predictor of future events. So this shows us trends, it shows us changes in risk, but it's not specifically saying an event is going to occur. But it is a good tool to evaluate the likelihood and the potential consequences of these severe events impacting drinking water assets in the future. And, can be an interesting tool to help the local and provincial decision makers in the future to better understand that uncertainty of climate change. So part of the work, we looked at a number of adaptation considerations that came out of the work and split them into two categories, one on the overall province scale, and then more specifics were provided to each of the sites. So on the provincial scale, really climate change considerations, right now it's not a requirement in the regulatory framework, but that is one option to sort of raise the bar as far as how much effort is put into better understanding this uncertainty. Identifying at the high risk sites where more specific risk assessment should really be completed before there's major capital upgrades. And to update the findings and the information of this site as the tools approve, because Monireh is already showing more interesting data there that would help limit the uncertainty. And from the spatial standpoint, there are certainly basins within the province that seem to present more potential future issues. So focusing effort there would be an idea. At the facility level, we tried to get, this was still a high level study, but tried to provide each of the facilities some general thoughts on future efforts. And so some of those are updating their current risk plans, drinking water safety plans, and emergency response plans, and so forth. Really protecting raw water intakes from physical damage was a big one. So are those pump houses high enough? Are the electrical systems high enough? That's really the primary assets at risk. Getting more data, river gauges are always nice to have as close as possible when doing a risk assessment of flood levels, and can consider doing a more detailed risk assessment on floods for your site specific location. On the low flow, there weren't as much risk, but and there's not as many options, I guess. If there's no water, there's no water. But really, there are some options to explore off-stream storage, either new or more, and alternate water supplies. So I think I'm done with time, and I'm also at the end. So that worked out not too bad. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jeff. Great presentation. Really interesting to see an application of some of the modeling scenarios that are being discussed. The report for this study is available on our website, both on the Water Innovation Program page, as well as the Water Innovation Connect series page. And Alex has provided a link to it in the chat. So we encourage you to take a look at the report if you are interested in that study. So we'll be moving over to the Q&A session, Q&A part of the session now. Continue to submit your questions. We'll get to them as quickly as we can. Before we jump into the detailed questions, I was going to start us off with a more general question. So for both Monireh and Jeff, given the different climate scenarios that you've seen through your work and your studies, what are your general thoughts on Alberta's water future? I'll put you on the spot a little bit here.
Okay, maybe I can start sharing a little bit of my thought. So I think this is a very broad question. So answer to this question depends on a specific region, time, as well as water use sector, perhaps. So the implication from this could be different to different water use sectors on time and space, for sure, and as well as our environment, as we saw from some of the figures that I showed, what does it mean to, for example, wetlands or versus, unfortunately, I didn't have time to present our crop production. So some of the results for crop production, for example, is promising in terms of how yields are going to increase based on projection results for the future. Whereas in the meantime, it brings a lot of risks in terms of flooding that we saw from Jeff's work and also some other flood and drought risk analysis that we have done and published, but unfortunately I didn't have time to show you. So I think it depends. So in different parts of the province and depending on what water use sector we're talking about, the risks or opportunities could be different. So yeah. But overall, in my understanding, or just overall, there is perhaps higher risk for southern half of the province as compared to the northern half.
Thanks, Monireh. Any thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, turn on my mic. I think Monireh hit the nail on the head as far as really, I think it's a lot of what you hear to date about Alberta's water future is droughts are going to get worse, floods are going to get worse, and it's sort of a blanket statement for the whole province, and creates quite the ripple effect. But I think what we see is that there is a lot of spatial variation, and those risks and therefore the potential needs and solutions are very site specific, and narrowing down that to focus effort on higher risk areas would help the conversation so that it doesn't seem like a insurmountable effort across the entire province.
I think great points from both of you, really making sure we understand our regions and not just from a provincial perspective, and targeting our approaches. Really appreciate those thoughts. So jump to the questions that have been submitted here. Monireh, I'm going to start with two quicker ones for you about model inputs. So the first one is, did the SWOT model accept leaf area index as an input? And if so, how was the leaf area index determined?
Yeah, one of the inputs very initial, just to initiate model, you actually provide land use, land cover map, and leaf area index as an index just to begin. I mean, when the model begins simulation at the time, but usually the first 3 years we just threw all of the results away because we call it initial conditional warm up. But other than this, model simulates leaf area index based on model kind of crop growth or plant or vegetation growth development over time, because there is a seasonal change in terms of crop canopy, leaf area, and therefore leaf area index. So this is something that is being simulated, and that is probably one of the strengths that I really like this model, because it not only simulates hydrological processes, but also it simulates crop development, vegetation, and plant development over time and over different seasons as well. So depending on above ground biomass or below ground biomass, how they develop over time and over different seasons, the canopy and then leaf area index is simulated over time.
Thank you. Second one about inputs. Do you use a global or regional climate model when you forecast future scenarios?
Yeah, this is a great question, actually. So we examined both of them, the time that regional climate models were available, 5 of them. But I know that these regional models are improved and better data are available. But the time that we examined, and actually the paper was published in Climate Dynamics, is available for everyone. And I'm also reporting this information in the report as well. So we did not find very good match in terms of regional climate models. So they were extremely over predicting future. The historical situation. So therefore we did not use them. And those 5 specific regional models that we used that time, they were not the best models. Therefore we never used them again. And so we just continued with the global climate models. And these are not directly global climate models from the IPCC kind of a data bank, because that is too coarse. We use the ones that are already one step examined and downscaled to national data, and they have examined so that these PCIC or PKIC, some people they call it, in BC, in Victoria actually research center, they have examined I think over 100 GCMs already, and they have come up with a list of only 12, and they are reporting in their publications that these 12 are representing the widest spread of future plausible conditions for the future, and therefore we picked 9 of them to our projections, assuming that those are predicting the widest possible range of projections for the future. And we further downscale to local Alberta condition. And therefore, we were more happy with these than regional climate models that did not quite well presented historical trend.
Great. I was going to build on that.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, there's another question that kind of follows up on that. You've sort of answered a little bit, but it's also for Jeff, so I'll still read it out. So in work we are participating in, we found that regional climate models can run at much higher resolution and capture important topographic features as well as storm tracks. So can you comment on how this may impact the evaluations for both presentations if only global climate models were used? So I don't know if Monireh, you want to continue thoughts on that, and then I'll pass it over to Jeff.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to add that I've seen a few other publications and some of the studies by other researchers in Canada that they are pretty happy with regional climate models. The other ones, the new, more advanced, and more from NordCap database, because the time that we started evaluating NordCap database was quite brand new, and there were not much data, and only 5 of them were available for us to examine. But I know that some of the researchers they are putting a lot of good kind of thoughts about these regional models, but I haven't had an opportunity to test them yet.
And Jeff, would you like to comment for your study?
Yeah, I mean, because we were looking at the watershed level and, the basically fairly large rivers and water basins, for that matter, lakes, the specific storm tracks aren't anticipated to be a big impact as opposed to the longer term trends.
Great. I'm going to go back to Monireh with this one, just to talk about a bit about your results. So interesting observation in Beaver River Basin. Lakes in Beaver River Basin have been declining for decades. Is this result show things are different for wetlands?
Would you mind if I go back to my results, maybe to the presentation? That helps me better answer your question.
Sure. In the meantime, I can jump to Jeff. This is a quick one. Did you investigate any risks associated to water quality risks or just flows?
Yeah, I was trying to type an answer and couldn't figure out how to submit that. But yeah, we did look at the impacts of water quality in a qualitative sense, and also base that on the actual treatment process. So for instance, a site that had a raw water pond would be impacted less by spikes of turbidity in a water source than one that does not. Or certain treatment processes are more flexible to big swings in water quality, and others are not. So that was incorporated into the risk, into the overall risk process, but we didn't actually define in any quantitative sense what the impacts of water quality may be.
Great. So you have a slide pulled up there. So just a reminder, the question was about the observation for the river basin. given for declining levels in lakes, and it looks like you're showing something different for wetlands.
Yeah, first of all, Vicky, just would like to remind again that we're not looking at wetlands, but we're looking at geographically isolated wetlands. These are the wetlands that are like isolated water bodies. They don't have any interactions with, theoretically, they don't have interactions with any river or lakes or any other water bodies. So therefore, assuming that these are isolated water bodies, basically they are being affected only by like a surface hydrological water balance, the water that are incoming and outgoing from them. So therefore, they are being affected by precipitation, by snow melt or snow accumulation on top of their frozen like kind of surface water, as well as by deep percolation or seepage from their bottom, and evapotranspiration, of course, and their size, right? If you think about the whole water balance within this isolated water body, that's how the simulation results look like in this region. So overall, like this is unfortunately I cannot show by mouse here, but if you look at 1, 2, 3, third graph from the left side, from the first row, that's the Beaver River. I guess your question is about this specific river basin. As you can see, there is a decline at the beginning of simulation, say the first perhaps few years, and then which is our status quo situation right now, because that's 2020, from 2017 all the way to 2020, and then it stays kind of constant. If you disregard those yearly fluctuations or seasonal fluctuations, the trend is a little bit constant, but then it suddenly increases and then decreases and then it stays constant. So you cannot, I guess, just generalize the status quo situation right now for this specific water bodies, because they are not quite really, in my opinion, following the overall hydrological regime, because they have their own specific system. But they are highly affected not just by hydrology and climate, but also their geographic feature. That was the kind of focus of this paper. And unfortunately, we didn't have very good geographic data to be able to present their capacity. But I would say even the assumption that we have made doesn't make a big error in our prediction. That being said, these predictions should be somehow reasonable, at least in terms of pattern. So to my understanding, to answer your question again, I think the first few, say 10 years of our projections, pretty matching what you just mentioned, to showing somehow declining or staying in the constant level.
Thank you. Got a few more here for you, Monireh, but quite a few related to groundwater that I'm going to try and combine into one question. But in general, how did you simulate groundwater contributions in your model? Can the SWAP model then simulate climate change on the impact of groundwater?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So for this, I would like just once again to scroll to one of my, question, like the slide that I'm listing all those limitations. One, the limitation that I'm listing over there is actually groundwater simulation here. If you look at process simulation in this slide, the last one, groundwater contribution, is presented by parameters. So we are somehow representing groundwater contribution when we are parameterizing, when we are like kind of calibrating our model, but we are not specifically simulating these physical processes and underground kind of interactions with surface water in that sense. We're not simulating that in this model. So therefore, we're hoping that in the future opportunities, we can link now our surface hydrological model with one of the best available and a more reasonable groundwater models in the future for better representation of groundwater surface water interactions. No, we're not simulating groundwater surface water interactions. Just as a side note, currently we're working with another project, also funded by EPCOR and AI through my other like kind of project with other collaborators, as you're aware. In that, for North Saskatchewan River Basin more specifically, we're actually interested to link surface hydrological model with groundwater. So we are exploring a little bit more how much surface water hydrology can be affected with and without groundwater contribution. distribution. But in this specific work, we are not simulating groundwater flow and its interaction with surface water in a dynamic fashion. It is presented, but it is not like dynamic. Does that
Great clarification? Thank you.
Okay.
Jeff, yeah. Thank you. So Jeff, this one's a little bit more quality related than climate change, but do you know of any applications in Alberta with saltwater issues in drinking water facilities?
Yeah, I mean, saltwater in drinking water facilities is certainly an issue in a number of areas that are reliant on groundwater. It's usually a groundwater issue with highly brackish water in deeper aquifers. So yeah, there are plenty of sites. Usually, it's smaller communities that don't have an obvious surface water source because there are challenges with saltwater treatment, and you're getting into fairly advanced treatment processes to use that source water.
Thanks. So this next question goes back to what the climate model input was being used and what's the right model to use for your scenario. So how reasonable is RCP 8.5, and are Alberta patterns approaching this? And both of you may be able to speak to this. Maybe Monireh, I'll let you start.
I'm sorry, I think it was a little bit disconnection at the beginning of your question. Could you please repeat it again? Hello? Hello?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
I think there are some disconnection, but now I can hear you.
We may have. Okay. How RCP 8.5, and are Alberta patterns approaching this?
Unfortunately, I cannot completely hear your question.
Yeah, Monireh, can you hear me?
Jeff, were you able to hear that?
Yeah, I was able to hear that, and I mean, as far as how reasonable it is or the patterns, that's, I don't know. As far as how reasonable did it seem as far as our project, as I said, it was surprising that we didn't see a huge variance from RCP 2.6 to 8.5 in the short term, but once we got into that mid-century, they certainly started to vary. So I think that just shows that there is there is more uncertainty as these models project out more into the future, and which way we're gonna go. I'll leave that to Monireh if she can.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you. Now the question is actually on the live mode, so I can see the question exactly. Exactly, as well said, actually, Jeff, because I think the same thing. According to predictions, RCP, there is not much difference between RCP 8.5 and 2.6 based on the data and evidence when it comes to short term or near future, we'll call it, because that's how greenhouse gas kind of emission is projected. But as the more we move towards the further down towards the end of the century, we see the bigger difference between these two. And as you saw, according to some of our presentations, when it comes to floods, for example, or droughts, the situation, everything becomes more extreme when it comes to far future with respect to RCP 8.5 as compared to 2.6. However, there is not a big difference between them when it comes to shorter term because of the emission scenarios that how they have been developed is related to climate change projections. But how it approaches the Alberta patterns, yes, when it's more extreme, it means that it is not following Alberta pattern, perhaps. But there is also, I would like to mention, I forgot, and I wish I had it in my list as well. In most of our studies, we should always keep in mind that these are based on future projections of global climate models. Most of them, they're considering the effects of global warming or greenhouse gas effects due to anthropogenic changes. And I'm not sure, at least to the best of my knowledge based on literature, they are not elaborating much on the natural variabilities, long-term cycles of natural variabilities. So most of these climate data and their projections, I had some conversation with David as well, David Soshen, and according to his research team and his research works, some of them, they are still presenting the effects of El Nino and so, at least the new recently kind of released models, but still based on the boundary condition, based on the physics representation of these models, they are still unable to actually present long-term cycles of climate variabilities due to, for example, PDO cycles, extreme long-term droughts or extreme long-term wet kind of years. We're missing those aspects. What we're seeing are only based on climate projections that are considering mainly greenhouse gas effects in the future, not natural variabilities. And I think when it comes to how these projections are or are not following albedo patterns, it requires more understanding of the albedo pattern in this regard as well. I personally haven't invested a lot of time to explore how in the past Alberta's water resources was in terms of how that was like following long-term cycles in terms of these PDO effects. But there are some studies that they are showing, at least for the precipitation temperature pattern, that it has been the case. So that being said, at this point, I cannot quite tell how much these predictions that are only based on greenhouse gas emissions are really following Alberta AB pattern. That requires more work, more integration of those cycles with the greenhouse gas predictions for future plannings. It shows some understanding, some ways that how possibly only greenhouse gas effect may affect our future, but what if it is combined with the effects of those long-term cycles of PDO extremes? That's something that I haven't done it yet, and this is something that pretty needed, I guess.
Thank you, Monireh. With that, I'm going to end the Q&A session. A big virtual round of applause to our speakers. Really appreciate your time today and sharing your thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky.
Thanks, Vicky.
Everyone for attending today's session. I hope the discussion sparks some new ideas. Really appreciate it. The recording will be posted on our website in the next week. We will be sending out a short survey after the session. Your feedback is really appreciated to provide quality content as we continue through this monthly webcast series.
Thank you very much.
Technology Development Station. It'll be held on August 13th. The full schedule can be found by clicking on the schedule button on the top right corner of your screen. And I look forward to connecting with you again all soon. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.